Welcome to OAA Now, your home for Oakland Activities Association news and information. Here's your host, Sammy Taormina.
Welcome to OAA Now. Here I'm Sammy Taormina, blog around the OAA, the host of Last Seat Brain Cells, and the host between Taormina's on Orion Television. I'd like to welcome those watching on Local Voice on SoundCloud and those watching Orion Television. A lot to look at this week here on this edition of the podcast here. Obviously, the big news out of Oxford. We're going to break that down and what comes up with them. Also, we're going to recap girls basketball and recap also what happened in the regionals for boys basketball. So a lot to really look at. And also there's a new volleyball coach at Troy Athens. So we're going to break all that down here on this week's edition of the podcast. Let's look at our main story here. It's going to be over at Oxford. Zach Line no longer at Oxford. He accepted a job as a special teams assistant over at with the Denver Broncos. Of course, his former coach is Sean Payton. Sean Payton, of course, used to be the the head coach of New Orleans Saints when Zach Line was there. And when you look at what he's done for Oxford, really a lot of great things, despite the going 19-28 in his 5 years with Oxford, but he did make 4 playoff appearances and has 2 postseason wins. Obviously, when you knock off Clarkston, in 21, and then of course Davison last year. So really, you look at the job that he's done. He's done a really great job with this program, taking over for his former coach and Bud Riley. So you really look at the job he's done. I mean, and then, obviously coming back to his alma mater to be with the Wildcats, to be with with this community, and obviously doing a lot of great things with Oxford. And that says a lot to what he's done with the, what they've done. When he took over that program, he completely changed the offense around, but kept a lot of the pound of rock stuff. He basically brought in virtually an NFL offense to run that system over there. Obviously, it always helps when you have proven players that he has as well, especially in that 21 class, where, obviously you look at the players, you look at the Carpenter, you look at Brady Carpenter, you had the great Tate Meir, a lot of proven players on that team, and I think, when the schedule they went through, the gauntlet they went through, getting in the playoffs was huge for them. They did it in 23. Same thing happened there. So a lot to be proud of. You know what I mean? He did a really, really great job with Oxford. He did a really, really great job with them. Bringing that community back, the football dominance, and they've taken off from there, and they've done a really great job with that team, building program strength. You look at it, you look at where Oxford's been. They built program strength and they've done a wonderful job. So, so that was really the instrument of Oxford, the job that he's done. And obviously, you look at the job he's done. Yes, he's got a losing record, but winning the Red Championship first time in school history last year. Had some really great running backs, great kids that they've had. And, and obviously you look at Oxford. They've been known as a gritty team, and they proved it under Coach Line. They had that same mentality of, you look at it, one team, one town, that mentality, and that leads to success. And, that led to success for Oxford. So, When you look at the job that Lyon's heading to, he's a special teams assistant with the Denver Broncos. Obviously, Denver's a team that is in the AFC West. Um, I talk a lot about Denver on Lastly Brain Cells with Ian Weatherspoon, and we speak about what is how's Denver going to look considering, they made some changes, even though this was a team that made the playoffs last year under Coach Payton. And Denver's a team that I think could make a ton of noise. They can make some big time impacts for sure. They can really do some things that, can surprise some people. I mean, but you look at that division Denver's in, though. You got, of course, Kansas City, who's been the AFC champions, Super Bowl champion, until they got knocked out by the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl. Got the Vegas Raiders. I think, the Las Vegas Raiders, I think they just traded for Geno Smith. I think Pete Carroll's taking over that team now, and, you look at you just got Geno Smith there, quarterback, so that's going to be really interesting to see how they look. And they got a very good defensive lineman, Max Crosby. Then you got the Los Angeles Chargers under Jim Harbaugh. So you look at special teams, very important job. And for Coach Lyon to accept the job as an assistant, one, it's a big honor, to get to the NFL because it's really hard to get in the NFL. I mean, Zach played in the NFL. He played with the Minnesota Vikings. He played with the New Orleans Saints. And, it's clearly, to go back, and then he retired to be to be the head coach at Oxford before going back to the NFL. It had to be a really difficult decision for Coach Lyon to accept this job. It had to be really difficult because, obviously, what Oxford means to Coach Lyon. You know what it means to him. And, for him to, to leave Oxford, this had to be a really difficult decision. I mean, it had to be. So when you look at Oxford, when you look at Coach Lyon with the Broncos, it'll be really interesting to see what happens with Coach Lyon. I mean, it'll be really interesting to see how that comes up. And I think it'll be something to keep an eye on. And we'll see what happens. But for Coach Lyon, the golden opportunity could pass up, and to go back to the NFL, to be with his former coach and Sean Payton. It had to take a lot for him to leave Oxford, and to be back with his former coach. It's hard to say no to the NFL, and that's really what it was. When you look at Oxford and you look at Sean Payton, being with him, you know what I mean? Obviously, it's tough. It's a tough decision. It was really tough. It had to be. It really had to be for him, not only for him, but also his family who settled into Oxford. So, I mean, but we'll see how it goes. I mean, I think, with Coach Lyon there in Denver, I think it's going to help them. It's going to deal with the altitude, obviously, because I know there's a lot of altitude there in Denver. So, so we'll see what happens. Now we look at the other side of things. Let's look at Oxford now. You look at Oxford. I mean, you look at this team and you kind of say you do lose a lot of talent. They do lose a lot of up front. But Coach Lyon left a program that was on the rise. And you look at it based with their sophomore class, going to be juniors next year. They should make the move up to varsity. You don't know what the questions are going to look like. You return a proven quarterback in Jack Hendricks, though. I mean, Jack Hendricks had a really nice year last year. I mean, like, you look at when he was a sophomore, he was up and down, but a lot more ups and downs. And then last year, he had a great year. He had a really, really great year. I don't have the stats with me, though, but he had a really monster year. You look at with Oxford, now you have Preston Wilder at running back. You look at, I mean, like Wilder, he's shared some time last year, but, obviously being the backup back, now you're the back. So that'll be really interesting to see how whoever the new coach is, handles the new quarterback, handles Jack, handles Preston. Still, there's some question marks with Oxford wide receiver. There's some question marks up front. It's not going to be the same team that really went through the league last year. Now they still got a very difficult schedule, so that'll be really interesting to see how the schedule does for Oxford going forward. So when you look at possible coaching candidates, I mean, you look at the job that Tony DeMere, the athletic director at Oxford's done. You look at, of course, the internal hires in the basketball programs. You look at, of course, Joe Fedoracek taking over the boys program. He's done a really great job since taking over for Coach Steve Laidlaw. But he's done a really nice job with Oxford. He's done a really nice job with the boys program. The girls' side of things, you kind of look at, of course, he settled with Trevor Marshall as the coach, and Trevor's done a really nice job with the girls' program. So when you look at internal hires, I think Tony's done a really great job with, going within for their head coach. Does he go inside for their new coach? That's the big question mark. Obviously, I've got some coaches in mind. Obviously, you look at some internal candidates. I know Coach Carpenter very, very well. I think he would be a good candidate. I think another candidate would be Coach Katie. Of course, he's at Oxford Middle School. He coaches the track program there. I think he'd be a good fit. If they wanted to go experience, obviously there's three names I could think of just off the get-go. First one I could think of is you got Kyle Riley. Of course, Bud's son, played at Oxford under Coach Riley. He's got coaching experience with Hazel Park. He's at Armada. His dad's his assistant. Would be a really interesting candidate. Would be. But that's one name that I thought about. Another one I thought about was Billy Keenest. Oxford alum, coached at Troy Athens, coached at Berkeley, he's coaching at Holly. That's another name to consider. Obviously, I know Coach Keenest extremely well when he was at Oxford, but I don't know if he'd be willing to leave Holly, considering the situation he's got right now. He's got a great situation over there at Holly, but it would be really interesting if Tony decided to give him an interview and come back to the alma mater. I mean, that would be a very interesting dynamic if he were to come back into the OAA. The other one is Coach Brown. Look at the job he's done at Imlay City despite the record. I mean, he's done a nice job building a program over there. I mean, obviously, you look at Imlay City, you look at the team that they built. So it's kind of really very interesting to see what direction they go. I mean, it'd be really interesting. Now, if Oxford were to go outside even another guy I would say could be a good fit is Chris Lee. Now, Chris, he went to Lake Orion, but he's the JV coach at Oxford. And he's done a really great job with that program. He's done a magnificent job of that program. And I know he teaches in the district. So that could be another candidate to watch for. So there's candidates. There's some good coaches out there. But I asked myself this question. Considering everything that Oxford's been through, if they go outside the box with their coach, with their new coach, that could be really dangerous. Because they don't know the Oxford tradition. They don't know they don't know, what I mean? Obviously, the things have gone on. They don't know that. So that would be really interesting if Tony decided to go outside the box for the new head coach. The previous coaches I mentioned are guys that, one, have Oxford ties, and two, they know what the town of Oxford, the community of Oxford looks like. They know what it is. So that's going to be a challenge for whoever takes the Oxford job if it's outside the names not mentioned. So it would be a really difficult job. And then also, what type of system are you bringing in? Because Oxford's been known for pound the rock. And then when Zach came in there, he NFLized the Wildcats. He NFLized them. You see them running a lot of pistol. You see them running a lot of the NFL stuff that Coach Lyon learned. And you look at the defense that he's put in there. I mean, he's put in a multiple defensive set. So you don't know, and you don't know how this is going to fit. You know what I mean? So this is going to be interesting to see who applies, who gets the job there, and the challenges that Oxford faces are going to be really real. Because one, you're replacing a lot of talent. You're replacing a lot of experience. The good news is you do have the quarterback. And having a quarterback like Jack Hendricks is a big deal. It's a huge deal. Because you look at what Jack Hendricks brings, he brings stability at quarterback. He brings stability in the most important position in football. He really does. I am a little concerned about the depth there. I mean, I'm really concerned about the depth because they lost so much. So there are some question marks with Oxford when it comes to depth. Obviously, program strength, I don't think's an issue there because of what Lyon has done with not only the varsity program, but with the youth levels, the freshmen, the JV, the Oxford Middle School programs, both the 8th grade and the 7th grade there, with the blue and gold teams there. He's done a really nice job with them. So, so whoever's coming in there is going to have a pretty good start. But if it's somebody who comes in outside the box with the names that I didn't mention, then that could be a concern. If Tony decides to go with somebody that I did mention, or go internally, then I don't think the transition period will be. I think the transition period will be smoother. If it's somebody outside the box, it's going to be rocky. So, and you're in a division like the Red, where you're going to have to see West Bloomfield, Adams, Clarkston, and your arch rival Lake Orion's in there. And that's not mentioning you got to go to Macomb, Dakota, which is going to be brutal. I got to see who they open up week 1 with. I week 1. I don't have the schedule with me, but it's going to be interesting. I mean, right now, where I have Oxford right now, I have them ranked but it's going to come down to who takes over that job as head coach. Who's going to take over? If it's somebody internal, I think that's a better fit for them. Who knows the area? Who knows the community? I think that would be the best fit for whoever takes this job at Oxford. I think that's where, familiarity goes into play, and I think that's where whoever takes the job there has to get used to the area. And we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I mean, could they go after a highly ranked coordinator? I mean, Nick Merlo could be a possibility. I mean, that's a name that, even though he's outside the box, he does have OAA connections. He does know the OAA quite well. But that's pretty much the only guy outside the box that I could see, maybe. But other than that, I just think, honestly, for this job, it's got to be somebody internal, or the guys that I mentioned who have Oxford ties, because being an alumni, playing in the Bud Riley system, I think it would make a lot of sense. So we'll keep an eye on it. That is for sure. We're going to keep an eye on it. That is for sure. So we'll see what happens. I mean, we're going to see what happens. Let's recap the boys a little bit, boys basketball side of things. When you look at the regional rounds, you knew it was going to be challenging, especially in the regional semis. Rochester falling to them, Waterford Mott. Both teams, you look at, Rochester just couldn't handle the interior of Waterford Mott, and that'd be a problem. But for Rochester, they had a great year. They had a really good year, winning a district championship on their home floor, knocking off Adams. That says a lot. Their program is built for the long haul. Coach Nicobola is really putting this program on the map, and I think this is going to be a team where I think could be really dangerous heading into next year. So that's something to really, really watch for. Is you look at Rochester, they're going to be built for the long haul. Could they be in the white? Absolutely. I mean, could they see Waterford Mott again? I mean, absolutely. I mean, if Waterford Mott, comes in the league, which is more and more looking likely it's going to happen, they could collide with the Corsairs again. I mean, a lot to really look at. But Rochester, program strength, they got a great future ahead of them. So we'll see what happens. Troy Athens had a really rough one with Warren De La Salle. It'll be rough, be really difficult. And it happened. I mean, it got ugly. Phoenix Glasgow had a big game. Nothing went right for Troy Athens. And that's what happened. Athens, they lose a lot. They got a couple guys coming back, key guys. Mitch Versino's done a really nice job with that program. Yes, they had a losing record this year, but they bounced back. Won a district championship, knocked off their arch rival Troy. And then they knocked off Royal Oak, which is really, on their home floor. So that does say something there. Anytime a visiting team goes onto somebody else's home and knocks them off, that says a lot. That really does. But they had a really tough match with Warren De La Salle, and, that's what happened. Now, Warren De La Salle, they're not in the playoffs. They lost a heartbreak on a very controversial call to Macomb Lutheran North, where I guess a coach, one of the coaches called a timeout, before a 3-point shot that was going to tie the game. So, I don't know whose mistake that was, but it cost him. It cost him dearly. So, and then Farmington, when I look at them, they had a really tough matchup with Wayne Memorial after upsetting North Farmington, having to survive Livonia Stevenson. Played well early, just couldn't sustain it and Wayne just took over with their experience. Wayne is still in. They knocked off Orchard Lake. They knocked off Detroit University Detroit Jesuit in the regional final. Really tight game there, but you got to give the Zebras a lot of credit for winning that game against a really good opponent in Farmington. Now, when you look at Farmington for next year, I mean, Byron Johnson's done a nice job with that team. He's done a really nice job. You look at what he's put team ball into Farmington. He's built that culture, built that foundation. I mean, he's clearly built that foundation for the future. And, he's done a wonderful job building that program. He's done a great job. His JV's going to be good next year. His freshmanship should be solid. So Farmington's a team that could be a very scary team heading into next year. So they could be really, really interesting to make some noise. And I think that's going to be something to really, really watch for as we head into the future. So we'll see what happens. I mean, we're going to see what happens with them. I think for Farmington, they're I don't know where they're going to stand when it comes into the divisions, especially for next year. So that'll be something to really keep an eye on is where does Farmington fit? Where does Troy Athens fit? And does having a deep postseason run make an impact? And I think it does. But we'll see what happens. I mean, we're going to see how things play out. Once the OA does release the leagues for next year. So it'll be something to really keep an eye on. I mean, does the divisions go 3 or does the divisions go 4 in the boys? I mean, that's the big question that's going to be on the docket heading into the year. So we're going to see what happens. Now let's look at the girls' side. We're now in the regionals. There's 4 teams that remain in the OAA. They won their districts. Couple games that were some very controversial games in the districts. We'll break those down. Obviously, you look at, we're going to look at the 4 districts won by the 4 teams. We're going to preview also the regional as well. When you look at it, the possibility of an OA regional final could be real at Lapeer. So we'll see how it goes. Let's look at our first district, and we're going to recap as District 22 over at Farmington's Mercy. To me, this wasn't much of a surprise. Farmington's Mercy, they did knock off Livonia Stevens in a really tight game. Farmington ran Livonia Franklin and lost that one. You look at winning the division, winning the gold, but the strength of schedule really hurt Farmington. The good news for them is they get a lot coming back. Is Coach Natty Nolak's got a lot coming back next year. And I really think for them it's going to come down to is can they keep growing? And I think playing tougher competition could be a really, really important factor. It could be a really, really important factor. So we'll see how it goes. But I think playing that type of schedule, playing that type of, if you play a tough schedule, and then your division's not as strong, then it'll be interesting to see how it goes. I mean, it'll be really, really interesting to see how Farmington goes, especially hanging in the next year, considering, they got a lot coming back, and do they want to test themselves? That's the big question, considering, they didn't look very good against Livonia Franklin. Livonia Franklin's not a very good team. But that's what happened. That's what happened. District 23 over at Detroit Renaissance. Oak Park got blown out by Hamtramck, 65-11. Yeah. Big time questions for the Knights. Big, big questions for Oak Park. A lot of questions. They won 1 game this year. They got a lot coming back. Question for Coach Tyler Washington's going to be, you got a lot coming back, but you got to build the program. you only have one team, which is not good. If you only have one team, you're not going to be developing a program. You're just developing one team. And that's not a good omen. So you got to build a program over there. You got to build something over there. So that's my take on that. I mean, a lot of questions. I mean, Detroit Renaissance won the district pretty handily. So we'll see what happens. Division 2, Harper Woods, with Adam St. Clair Shore South Lake. It's the district where Warren Regina was in. Harper Woods fell to St. Clair Shore South Lake. It was a tight game, but, you got to give credit to the Cabs. Pioneers had an up and down year. They really had an up and down year. They really did. So there's a lot of questions next year for Harper Woods, considering where they're at. So that's something to really, really keep an eye on with them is for Coach Latoya Tate is you do got a proven player in Iowa West coming back, which is going to help. But the question is for Harper Woods is where do you go from here? And I think for them, the problem's obvious. They got to schedule more games. They have to schedule a tough competition. They got to schedule more games. I mean, you only played 19 games this year. You only played 19. There's 22 games. You can play 3 extra games. You can. I mean, there's plenty of teams that are looking for games. There is. I mean, you look at the teams, especially in Wayne County. I would love to see Harper Woods play a Grosse Pointe South or a Grosse Pointe North to test themselves. I would love to see them. I mean, yes, they got a rivalry in Chandler Park Academy. I mean, but then, you got to play some teams like, you got to play Lakeshore. You got to play like, or South Lake. You got to play those type of teams, basically, to get yourself ready for this postseason. I think if you play a district team, that'll get you ready for that. I think that'll get you ready. But a lot of questions for Harper Woods heading into next year. There's so many questions with them. There really is. Then you look at Pontiac. Pontiac was with Pontiac Notre Dame Prep. That district was won by Detroit Country Day. So when you look at Pontiac getting back in the postseason for the first time, they didn't make the postseason last year, but they were in it this year. Lost a really tough one to Cranbrook, Blue Bales Cranbrook Kingswood. So they got a lot coming back for Coach Christopher Wright. There's a lot of players coming back for them. So I think for Pontiac, just getting better, keep developing. You're going to get more kids into the school. We're going to play basketball. Did this bring up the possibility of building a JV team? I think it does. I mean, there is going to be some questions for Coach Christopher Wright in the Phoenix. How the program's going to look, how it's going to build. I mean, that's the big question that awaits Pontiac. So we'll see what happens. I mean, we're going to see what happens and then go from there. So we'll see what happens. Let's go to district number 26. This was over at Swartz Creek. Oxford ended up falling in a tough one to Davison, 36-33. When you look at Davison, obviously they have that big in the middle. Not sure how that game went, but there were some, I haven't looked at the film yet of that game, but, Davison found a way to shut down Oxford. They found a way. I mean, they shut down Allison Hofstadler. They shut down Sophia Robb. They shut down Mia Shemp. They held them to 33 points. That says a lot. It really does say a lot. So, you got to give credit where credit's due, though. You got to. Really got to give them credit to where credit's due. But for Oxford, for them, next year, obviously this year for them was the coaching stability. You know what I mean? Obviously, when you have three different coaches, you're going through three different systems. That is a very difficult transition for Oxford. That's really difficult. I feel like for them, they got the right people in place there. They got the right people in place. I feel like they got the right coach in there in Trevor. He's done a really nice job with that program. And I think he's going to do a great job at Oxford. I think he's going to do a really, really good job there. And I think, obviously, you don't know where he stands, but I think for Oxford, I think next year for them, yes, they lose three big pieces. They lose the three big pieces. So I think for Oxford next year, there's gonna be some questions for them next year. There's really gonna be some big questions for Oxford. Yes, they got Mia Champagne coming in. They got Caitlin Brockway coming back. JV wasn't as strong as thought, but their freshmen had a nice year. I think they only had like 3 losses. So Oxford's a team I think could make some noise, but you don't know that. You don't know what you're going to get with them for next year. So there's some questions when you look at Oxford hanging into next year. A lot of questions. Then let's look at District 28. District 28, we look at, there are 3 teams in here, Adams, Stony Creek, and Rochester. Let's start with Adams. I mean, Adams was injury riddled this year. They were really injury riddled. You could have, should have wondered with them. You could have, should have wondered. What if they were healthy? What if they were fully healthy? I think Adams is better than a 4 seed. They gave Romeo everything it could handle. But Romeo ended up knocking off Adams 37-33. And in a low-scoring defensive game, you knew that defense. And Romeo lost 2 girls in that game, including Maya Mudchung. Hurt her knee. And Adams has been injury riddled all year long. The injury to face Zolas was huge. But of course, Layla Tomahawk. You look at next year for Adams. I think Adams is going to be better. I think they're going to be much better. The key for Coach Joe Malberg is, can they stay healthy? That's the big question for Adams, is can they stay healthy? Because they can't, there's going to be some trouble. And it'll be just like last year. Can they stay healthy is the big question. So we'll see what happens. But Adams, around 500 this year. A lot better than they've been in the past 3 years for Coach Joe Malberg. A lot better. It's just making that next step. Program strength's a bit of a concern when you look at Adams. Obviously, you got to get obviously, that pipeline at Van Houston's still there. You got some kids coming from West. So that should help. That should really, really help Adams in the future. It should really help them. Then let's look at, Rochester. Rochester, I think, to me, looks like they had that tough loss to Stony Creek, and I watched that game. Taylor Wood, their guards is going to be a big concern next year. And they don't have Alice Max or Kylie Robinson. Taylor Parsons had a really nice year for them. She's back for them. But now she's the main focal point. That's a concern for Coach Andy Toppy. When you don't have that in Max and Robinson next year, you're gonna have to change everything up with them. You're gonna have to change everything up. There's a lot of questions. So we'll see what happens. We're gonna see what happens with them. But there are a lot of questions with them. And then there's Stony Creek. Stony Creek ended up losing in the district final. Very controversial game, 49-46 in the district final. You really got to think about, they missed a ton of shots. They missed free throws. That's a recipe for not winning games. So I took advantage of that. The Turner twins played well, especially Janelle Turner. She went off for a couple threes. So that's really where you look at for Stony Creek. And there's some question marks for Coach Columbus Williams' team. You lose Merrick Schlaw back. Jalen Freeman coming back should help. They got the Avash sisters coming back. Also, they got Samantha Fulkerson's another one. I think Fulkerson's going to be the one to really keep an eye on this offseason. But Stony Creek's definitely a team to keep an eye on this offseason, especially with what they've been through. Really been through. So we'll keep an eye on that. Then District 24 over at Birmingham Marion. Birmingham Marion won that district, knocking out Bloomfield Hills. Let's start with Groves. Groves had a shocking blowout loss to Bloomfield Hills. And it was a shocker, 55-33 in the first round. I could not believe that score. I really couldn't. They lose. Groves only loses one senior in Rose Strada. Harlem Simpson's back. J.C. Roy's back. Future's bright for Coach Jessica Dubois. Future's really bright for them. For me, the biggest concern with Groves is going to be their size. Size and program strength and depth. That's the big concern I have with Groves for next year. Size, program strength, and depth. That's the big concern. Then let's look at North Farmington. North Farmington was blown up by Birmingham Marion. Coach Michael Allens got the majority of their freshmen coming back. When you look at the Raiders, they got some key players. They did lose a couple of them. But for Coach Michael Allen, I think the future's bright for him and his team. Program strength's a big concern for me. Size is another concern for me when I look at North Farmington. So those are things to really keep an eye on with them. Is the size and but they got some really nice pieces. I mean, their underclassmen are really good. I mean, no doubt, and they're going to get better. I mean, they got AAU coming up, they got summer ball coming up. So a lot of things to really look at for North Farmington heading into next year. So a lot of positives as we look at the Raiders heading into next year. A&T lost to Bloomfield Hills. A&T had a great year. I mean, they had a nice year. I mean, they had a really, really nice year. How do you explain it with them? I mean, you look at with them, they like to go, go, go. And sometimes that style fits well, sometimes it doesn't. Bloomfield Hills slowed it down. But it's always hard to beat a team 3 times in 1 year. A&T did that to Bloomfield Hills, beat them twice. But lost. Lost when it counted. So we'll see what happens. I mean, but A&T, they lose some key players. They lose Christian Banks. So Shaquille Cochran, it's gonna be a test for her next year when you look at what A&T's got coming back. Big test for Lumen. We'll see what happens. Seal lost to Birmingham Marion. Oh, did I have expectations for this team? Unfortunately, they didn't match them. I mean, they really didn't match them. You talk about the expectation media day. One of the favorites in the white. I had a number 1 in my poll for about 3-4 weeks. Then they went on a terrible losing streak, and then they didn't win the division, and then they lost to a very good Birmingham Marion team despite their record. It's a lot of question with Seal. They lose a lot of talent. They lose a ton. So we'll see what they have coming back. I mean, we're going to see. But there's a lot of questions with them. A lot of questions. And then Bloomfield Hills. I mean, you look at the Blackhawks. there's some questions with them. I mean, they lose Brianna Young. They lose 7. They lose a lot of seniors. They lost a ton of proven talent. They lose a lot of experience. There's a lot of questions with them. A lot of questions. So that's going to be something to really keep an eye on. Is for Coach Ronaldo Brown, his first year there, leading to a district final. Big questions. Program strength is going to be a big test for Bloomfield Hills next year. Big test for them next year. And then let's look at the districts that have OAA teams remaining. First over at Hazel Park. Ferndale knocked off Madison Heights Lamprey pretty convincingly. Ferndale University was in this district as well. They had a really tough loss to Madison Heights Lamprey. Great year for Coach Benny Sorowski. Skakowski in his first year. Great year. Winless to 10 games. To winning 10 games. Says a lot. Nowhere to go but up for the program. He's done a really nice job. Now comes winning a postseason game. It's easier said than done. But they did a really nice job. Give them props. I give them props. Then Ferndale, of course, winning a district championship. Not a lot of players. Obviously, they got 7 girls on the roster. But Devin Petaway's done a nice job with that team. He's done a really nice job. You look at, of course, Anaya Davis. You look at Demi Bolton. You look at, they got a bunch of young talent on that team. The question is, can they stay together? That's the big question. I mean, we're going to see what happens. But Ferndale, using their red experience, to win this district championship. Question is, can they take the next step? That's the big question. It's going to be the big question for them. We'll talk about them when they're in their regional. And they got a tough regional. They got a really tough regional. Royal Oak. When I look at this one here, Royal Oak won their district, knocking off Berkeley. Let's look at Troy Athens first. When I look at the Red Hawks, I've said this about them. They're a classic Scooby-Doo team. They're a classic Scooby-Doo team. And it showed. It showed this year. Yes, you lose 3 very key players. They do. So Coach J.C. Clump's going to have a challenge ahead of her. She's going to have a big challenge ahead of him. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But for Stacy, it's going to be a challenge for sure with Troy Athens going forward. And I think that'll be something to really keep an eye on with them is, can they make the next step? That's the big question. Program strength solid. So Athens will be in the conversation next year. Troy. When you look at Troy, the win against Utica Ford was huge. Then they knocked out their arch rival, Troy. Then they ran into Berkeley. Troy loses some key players. They lose Sophia Castanis. They lose Kelsey Block. They lose Reagan Zeider. Those 3 are going to be big losses. Lose Allie Mantuza as well. That's another loss. Savannah Oddly's another one. You look at Macy Zeider's development, especially late in the year. She started to get settled in. She's really starting to get settled in. And you put her with Diamond Prince next year. Diamond Prince had surgery on her knee. So Diamond Prince and Macy Zeider next year. Got Carly Higginbottom in the middle. Next year could be almost a Coach Laura Guzman-like team. Considering, I know she likes to go 4-guard, 1 big set. So Troy, watch out for them. Program strength looks solid. I think Troy could be a very dangerous team next year. They could seriously be a really dangerous team next year. And then let's look at Berkeley. Berkeley had a nice year. They had a great year. They knocked off. They were second in the blue. Got the district final. They lose some key players. They lose Avery Wintergarten. They lose Manny Basso. Coach Clay Shaver's got a program building over there. I've seen their freshmen. I've seen their JV programs. They're good. They are good. They'll be back. They'll be back in the conversation. And then Royal Oak, winning their district, obviously. I didn't know they had a pet dinosaur. did not know they had a stuffed doll. Motivates them. It's kind of that, I know assistant coach Michelle Scar, who's at Waterford Mott, has been known for bringing stuffed animals for the postseason. So and it's working well over there for Coach Brian Zapata and the Ravens. Working really well. Then there's West Bloomfield. West Bloomfield won their district. They knocked off Orchard Lake. They knocked off Lakeland in a stress fest over there in the district semis, and then knocked off Orchard Lake St. Mary's 41-36. A lot of that's got to go to their defense, particularly Sheraton Beal, the Gamble Jones sisters, Ava Lord, London Hall. I mean, Darren McAllister's done a nice job with this team. And you look at that district, that regional, that district, it was tough. They had Orchard Lake St. Mary's in there. St. Mary's is a good team. They're a very good team. They got a lot of young talent on that team. So it's a good win for them. So now they move on to the regionals. And then the district at Clarkston. Start off with Waterford. Of course, Waterford's going to be coming in the league really soon. Ran a very good Clarkston team. They lose 7 seniors. But they have Satonis coming back, which is going to be huge for them. But anytime you lose 7 seniors, it's going to be tough. Especially when you have Waterford United. It's going to be very, very tough for them. It'll be very, very difficult for them going forward. So we'll see how that one goes. Avondale losing to Lake Orion in a high-scoring game. Avondale loses a lot for Coach Roy Chrisman. They lose a lot. Sasha McClellan comes back next year for them, for Coach Roy Chrisman. He's going to have to rebuild that team. He's going to have to reload that team. A lot of questions for Avondale, though. There is a ton of questions for them. Can they sustain? That's the big question. You lose a lot of senior heavy experience. You do lose a lot of them. So we'll see what happens with them. We're going to see what happens. Then there's Lake Orion. Lake Orion, of course, tough one against Clarkson. 17-point lead, had a chance. Then Izzy Walensky got her 4th foul, and then that game totally changed. They fought back, got the overtime, but just couldn't have enough. When I look at Lake Orion next year, they lose 3 players in Charlotte Poplowski, Izzy Walensky, and Mel Guccione. Their JV was solid for Coach Bob Bridges. And I think there's some players on there who are on the JV can make some noise in the varsity. Kara Veter's going to be one to watch for next year. Lala Hill. That's your future guard combination. Interior is the big question for Lake Orion. The interior is the big, big question. Is Jasmine Randolph the answer there? But there's others in the pipeline. You look at a player like Maddie Cluth or Trinity Hayes. Those are 2 players that could really make some noise next year. You look at the future of that program. Abby Nearing, Mary Graves. You got Addie Walensky there. So the pipeline is there for the Dragons. The pipeline's there. I think this summer is going to be very important for Lake Orion. I think if they can keep together, build the bonds, develop chemistry, they could be a really good basketball team next year, despite losing the 3. But the summer is going to be huge. If they can go, they have their own summer league. You have Northwood. You got trip to Ohio. If the girls are there and committed, this is a dangerous basketball team. But they got to be there. And it's on the players. And they do got Danny Heck also coming back as well. So, but this is going to be on the players. It's not on Coach Bob Bridges. It's going to be on the players next year. Especially this summer being a really critical year for them. And then there's Clarkston. Clarkston, of course, winning the district 2nd straight year against Lake Orion. And obviously, the biggest concern I have with Clarkston, yes, Eliana Roback and Brooklyn Cooper had big games. Lyon Morganer had a big game. The question for Coach Aaron Goodnow is the staleness. Is his team getting stale? That's the big question. Anytime you get stale, that's really dangerous. And I think Clarkson is heading to that place right now. Because you know what you're getting with Clarkston. You know what you're getting. And that's the big concern with the Wolves are they getting stale? That is the big concern. Despite winning a district. And that's just being honest. If this team's stale, that could be some problems. They move on, though. They move on the district and the regional. So let's look at the regional. First, we're going to look at Ferndale. Their path, they got to go through. They should get by Redford Union. Then likely starting at Detroit Edison. Defending Class B Division II state champs. It's going to be very difficult for them. They get to, if they get to Detroit Edison on their home floor. Really difficult for Coach Petaway. Really difficult. Royal Oak, going to have a rematch. Warren Cousineau, after a buzzer beater last year from Lucy Freytag. They knocked out the Patriots on their home floor last year. So that should be a fun matchup. Whoever wins that one over at St. Clair Shores Lakeview will take on either Utica Ford 2 or Macomb, Dakota. That should be a really interesting matchup. But Royal Oak, I think you got a chance to win that region. I think you got a chance. You're going to have to play well, though. We're going to have to play really well. And then the regional at Lapeer. West Bloomfield will take on Grand Blanc in a Division I state championship rematch. Two teams played earlier in the year. Last game of the regular season, West Bloomfield won 76-39. Sheridan Beal had a monster game in that one. I don't know how Grand Blanc is going to defend her. I know they got Leah McQueen, but they clearly don't have an answer for Beal. I mean, I know they're going to put McQueen on London Hall. So Coach Bob Taylor, he's going to have it really difficult. He's going to have it extremely difficult. And then you got Clarkson, Utica Eisenhower. Despite the controversial win for Ike against Stony Creek, Ike, if they got a young team, Turner Twins, really young team. Devin Raymond's their only senior on the roster. Clarkston, we know about the guards, Roback and Colbert. If their bigs can show up in this game, I think they're going to be fine. I think it's going to come down to whoever wins the battle on the boards between the Wolves and the Eagles. Because Ike's going to play that full court trap every time. They're going to play that full court trap every time down the floor. And Clarkson, they're more than capable of shutting that down. They're more than capable of scoring points off that. You can score off that. Stony Creek did that. They did a wonderful job on that. So, and then for Clarkston, obviously, just got to tighten things up. They got to clean things up. If they clean things up and West Bloomfield does their thing, we could be seeing an OAA Red rematch at Lapeer between Clarkson and West Bloomfield. Wouldn't that be very interesting for one of those teams to get back into the Division I state quarterfinals? Would be interesting. I'm not sure if they got to see Rockford. I don't think they see them until the state final, but that would be really interesting if that were the case. Considering we know how good Rockford is this year. They got to play Saginaw Heritage, that's going to be really interesting. That could be a really good game between Rockford and Saginaw Heritage. That could be. So we'll see what happens. I know today is the first day of spring sports, so I wish everybody the best of luck going out for spring sports this year. You got baseball, softball, boys tennis, track and field, lacrosse. And, of course, we have boys volleyball. And, of course, so we'll see what happens. All right, we're going to sign off here. Make sure you follow the blog at Saginaw@blogspot.com for the latest information around the OAA. We're going to sign off. Take care. God bless. See you all next week. God bless.